Every time that I need to clap to sync the audio, I just feel like Nancy Pelosi, like. Hi, hello, how's it going? It's Lo. In case you guys didn't hear for the first 517,000 times that I mentioned this in my Twitter and in this channel, I'm an attorney. Yeah, I know, what a shocker. It's not like I've mentioned this like every other video that I've ever recorded, right? But, however, today is a different day because today I actually brought the receipts. This is by far and wide the most expensive identification document that I've ever acquired in my entire life. When you pass your bar in Brazil, you get this little card right here, and I'm covering my name, but you get this little card, and this is what I use to identify myself. But you also get this. It's like this passport of sorts, and I don't know what its purpose is. I never use this as an identification document. Maybe it makes for a good thumbnail though. Anyway, so now y'all know that I'm not just talking shit. I am actually an attorney. The reason why I mentioned this fact and I bring the receipts today is because I was reading a lot in January when I had my break, and I found myself drawn to a type of book that is garbage. Those cheap romances that you buy or you get for free from Kindle Unlimited. And I kind of realized, like, those authors that write a lot of porn have this unhealthy obsession with lawyers. Like, if lawyers are this hotshot type of alpha male who can, you know, spin the entire justice system around the little fingers. And I'm like, dude, that's literally not it. Like, I honestly feel like the majority of my time in office is spent like literally winging it and then going, holy shit, that worked. You know, I cry a lot. I have terrible days. The pay is really not that good once you begin working. You work really long hours. And generally, like, the people that you work with are not those alpha type hotshot lawyers at all. If you do find a person like this, they either are like the partner's son or they're just like all talk and no work, which annoys me the ever living shit out of me because nothing annoys me more than having to work with people who are incompetent. And you know, all of those lawyer hotshots are extremely good in bed and so hot and so attractive. And you know, speaking from anecdotal evidence, that's not true at all. No. Since I think I can be an Own Voices reviewer, I was struck with the idea, what if I review lawyer romances as a lawyer? So today we're actually investigating a couple of lawyer books that I feel like I could offer my own 2 cents on based on my experience as an attorney. So first things first, a little definitions and a couple of explanations. Law school in Brazil works a little differently than law school in the United States, and as far as I know, law school in the UK works. Basically, in Brazil, you don't go to college for an undergrad and then you go to college for a grad. In Brazil, you just go for a bachelor degree. That bachelor degree can vary between 4 years and 6 years. Law falls squarely in the middle. It's a 5-year course for a 5-year bachelor degree. And it's very common for you to go to college and get into college straight out of high school. So I got into law school when I was 17. That was 2014. And I graduated from law school in 2018 when I was 22. When you're in law school in Brazil, it's also very common for you to be an intern, like full-time. So it's not like in the US where you have summer internships and then, you know, when you're in class, you're not necessarily working at a law firm. In Brazil, it's very common for you to go to law school in the morning, have a quick lunch break, and then work almost like a paralegal in the afternoons. And I did that for 2.5 years. And when I graduated, I was an intern at a law firm. And I was hired as an associate attorney. So this is the same place that I'm still working today. When it comes to my work, I am a human rights attorney. Human rights advocacy is something that is quite diverse. When we think human rights attorney, we're usually thinking like criminal law and doing criminal defense and whatnot. It can be like that, and I know a lot of people who actually do it. This is not necessarily my case. In my firm, particularly because it's a smaller firm, I I do a lot of public law in general, so I work a lot with defense of civil servants' rights, defense of education, specifically superior education. I work a lot with defense of health workers, and I work a lot with unions. So I am an attorney for several unions in my area. Unions in Brazil are very participative in the public sphere, so there's always something that they're doing that gets the highlight. You know, my name came out in the news once or twice, you know, like the time that I sued a very hotshot guy in the government and won, and then that came out in the news, and I was like, holy shit. I'm gonna die. Specifically, when it comes to courts, I do a lot of consultant work nowadays. I don't work with litigation as much anymore, but I still work with superior court litigation. So the majority of the litigation that I do nowadays in Brazil is in the Supreme Court, the Brazilian Supreme Court, which I absolutely love. When you take your bar exam in Brazil, you kind of have to define what area of the law that you want to do your test in, and I did mine in constitutional law. I absolutely love constitutional law. It's one of my favorite areas. Also, as a matter of fact, I still go to grad school. I am currently pursuing my master's in philosophy of law full-time, as I'm working full-time. How does that work? It doesn't. I suffer a lot. My credentials established. Let's talk about the books that I'm going to review. I am going to review books today based on lawyer representation and accuracy of the legal system representation. I want you guys to bear in mind that there is a significant difference of legal systems between countries. The legal systems in the United States particularly are very different from legal systems all over the world, particularly because legal systems all over the world tend to make sense, which the American system just decided it's not necessary. But at the same time, there's a lot of aspects of the law, especially being a woman in law or being a woman of color in law, that are applicable throughout all legal spheres. Especially because, you know, we are in a point in legal development that for you to be recognized as a country, you kind of have to have a legal system that is structured more or less the same. Basically, like, there is a lot of commonalities, even though the systems may be different. So I may not be able to report on the actual particulars of a certain legal aspect, but on the general vibe of it, I can lawyer check the vibe of the books, and basically that's what I want to do today. So also, by the way, this review and this video might contain a little bit of spoilers because some plot points are integral to the legal representation of the stuff. So, you know, I'll try not to spoil anything, but the majority of these books, I really don't suggest you to read them. So, you know, I think everyone is gonna be okay. Yeah, without further ado, let's get started. The first book in my list is called Practice Makes Perfect by Julie James. This is a book that I admittedly read a while ago, and I did not reread for this video because y'all couldn't pay me enough. It's very similar to The Hating Game, if you've read that book, which was one that I actually enjoyed. Basically, the two main characters are associate attorneys at a big law firm, and when we say big law, that's usually like the huge law firms that have offices all over the world and get really high-profile cases, and make a lot of money. The main couple actually works together, they're in the same level, and they don't really like each other a lot, but they kind of like manage to hide that through, mostly because they don't really work together, until one day they're forced to work together in a case, and they're kind of like getting along until they realize that they're actually being evaluated because there is a position for partner available and one of them is going to take that place. Like, this is not a particularly remarkable book, I would say, but I do remember this book particularly because the girl comes from an impoverished background, so she's kind of like the first one in the family to be an attorney. You know, she doesn't have the security of having a family network that can connect her to the right people in the right places, so she kind of like has to fumble around to make it on her own as an attorney. And the guy is actually from a family that has a strong lineage of lawyers, and they have all the right connections in all the right places. So I do remember that this book captures quite well the feeling of being a woman in the legal profession and being like, I have to work 3 or 4 times as hard to get the same things that this motherfucker gets because he's able to play golf with the boss at the right place at the right time. You know, those things kind of weighed on you. And I remember very clearly when I got into law school, people were like, oh, you have to do the public audition to become a clerk or to become a civil servant. Because if you try to be an attorney, you'll never make it because your family doesn't have attorneys and you don't have the right connections. And I've had professors telling me that. So I specifically remember this from law school, and I remember this from when I read this book. It was like, yeah, that fucking happens. I will give this book 3 out of 5 gavels for lawyer representation. As for the book itself, it's really not that remarkable. Also, like, the way that this book describes feminism is like not good. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I feel like this is something that a lot of people don't quite understand when you go into the legal profession, that this is a boys club, this is an old man club, and this is a rich club. And if you're neither of those things, and you're not connected to any of those things, then you're gonna have a harder time. That's the harsh reality of it. The next book on the list is Walk of Shame by Layne. This book is an enchanted retelling. We didn't need that. Basically, in Walk of Shame, we are following this girl called Georgiana, or Georgie, and Georgie is a socialite in New York City. She lives a very pampered shelter life, and she has an apartment in a building, and she parties every day, and she's generally just a really bad character, if I might add. She has a neighbor who she has a bit of a cold war going on with him, and he's very stern, very hot, and very cold, and he is a divorce attorney. I don't think I'll ever understand the obsession of people writing lawyer romances with divorce attorneys. But basically this guy's a divorce attorney, and he's a hotshot divorce attorney. He works for all of the celebrities. He works for all of the rich people. So there's a lot of that going on. And they basically have this cold war and, you know, hate to love, sparkles and sure, yay. This book as a romance, I think I mentioned it in my January wrap-up, that it was not good. The characters were really flat. I didn't really need an Enchanted retelling. Enchanted came out like the other day, and I don't think that it's time for retellings yet. Unless it's a sapphic retelling. We've been through that. I would want that. Please give it to me. In terms of legal representation, this book pissed me the fuck off. Basically, if you don't know, maybe you imagine that when you are a lawyer, you have to keep a secrecy on matters that your clients share with you. You know, you can't just go out in the world and spill the secrets of everyone who passes through your office. Like, you have to keep your fucking mouth shut, even if the person doesn't end up hiring you. Even if you cannot take the case for personal reasons or, you know, for conflicts of interests, you cannot disclose any of that conversation to anyone. I know people say that lawyers are like snakes and people without ethics, but trust me, there's a lot of ethics involved in being a lawyer. I was going to say that if you don't keep up with the ethics, you lose your license, but Rudy Giuliani is still out there, so, you know, maybe other countries are laxer than Brazil is, but, you know. Anyways, Rudy Giuliani's melting hair dye aside, generally, the duty of confidentiality is a huge part of the legal profession. And the conflict of Walk of Shame is basically because the guy, who is a divorce attorney, gets access to some information that involves Georgiana's family. So the guy's interested in Georgiana, they have kissed already, and a certain person of Georgiana's family comes to him and asks him to kind of like work through their divorce. And the guy is like, well, this is a person that I know, and this is the family of a person that I care for. There's a clear conflict of interest in here, so I cannot take the case. And he passes the case on to a partner. But then Georgiana gets pissed at him because A, he didn't tell her about that information, and B, he's breaking up happy endings. First things first, if this guy were to tell her, like, the secrets of people who come to his office, he would lose his fucking license. And in the book, it is said that he graduated law school from Harvard. Like, homeboy spent a fucking lot of money. Like, I know a couple of people who graduated from Harvard. One of my best friends is actually finishing up her JD in Harvard as we speak. And I don't think a single one of her friends, or the people that I know that graduated in other major law schools, would ever risk their diploma over anyone. Literally, there's no pair of boots or dick that is good enough for you to risk your diploma like that. The whole indignation that came from Georgiana was simply stupid because he literally could not do what she was asking. He could not divulge that information. Also, if you look for a divorce attorney, that happy ending was gone. Don't shoot the messenger, or in this case, don't shoot the attorney. Like, the guy is simply working through the wishes of the people who want to get divorced. And the guy still apologizes for omitting the information from her, and also for working with what he works. As a romance reader, this book annoyed me a lot. As a lawyer, this book annoyed me the fuck off. Like, if I am vaguely interested in a person and that person told me to break the oath I took in order to get this fucking document, then we're through. We're through. Literally, there's no interest that is worth this fucking shit. Do you know how much it cost me to get this shit? No. Anyway, I gave Walk of Shame 1 gavel out of 5 because the legal representation in this is bullshit. Also, the guy follows a strict schedule. Like, the guy wakes up at 5 a.m. every day and goes to bed at like 9 p.m. and eats properly and gets annoyed if things pull him out of his routine. And I'm like, bitch, are you even an attorney? My biological clock, my circadian cycle is completely fucked ever since I graduated. Ever since before I graduated. So, like, there is not a single attorney that I know of that has a regular sleep schedule. This shit doesn't exist. Either you become an attorney or you have a regular sleep schedule. Like, the two of them don't go together. Anyway, this book is shit for legal representation. Also, in terms of romance, it is not good. Do not recommend. The next book on this list is this one. This is Bom Dia, Verônica by Raphael Montes and Ilana Casoy. Some people have mentioned to me that this is available in other countries' Netflix as a series. This is a Netflix series that is made in Brazil with amazing actors, by the way, and I highly recommend watching it. I will admit this is not a book that I have finished. I am a quarter, almost halfway through with this book. I pick this book up, I read a chapter, then I bail out and I just never pick it again for a month. Basically, Bom Dia, Verônica is a book that is set in São Paulo, so in Brazil. And we follow this police officer called Verônica, and she's a civilian police officer because in Brazil you have the military police that does the patrolling and the arresting and whatnot, and you have the civilian police who does the investigation. Verônica gets to work one day and she ends up finding this suicide case that she suspects it's actually a homicide. So she's investigating that, and while she's investigating this suicide potential homicide case, she gets a random call for a woman. And this woman says, like, I think my husband is going to kill me. And Verônica is like, okay, why? And the woman is like, because he has killed other women and I have seen him do it, so I think he's going to kill me too. And basically what Verônica is trying to do is to solve that suicide and also trying to find who this woman is and try to help her. And then eventually she finds out that the two are kind of connected. So it's a police thriller, an investigation thriller. This book is so fucking difficult for me to read, precisely because the lawyer representation in this is A+, and the legal system representation in this is A+. This is a book that talks about domestic violence, and Brazil has this law called Lei Maria da Penha that basically talks about domestic violence and domestic abuse and how the police should proceed with domestic violence cases. But the police doesn't proceed as the law says. And as a person who has worked with human rights for quite some time and has worked with feminist activism for quite some time, I have helped so many women try to get help from the police, from their abusers, and like the way that the system does not work for certain women is so infuriating that while I was reading this book, like, I cannot progress with this book because it just immediately puts me in a flashback position of witnessing the system failing so many women and letting so many women get killed. The descriptions in this are so good that I can smell the fucking police office. Like, I can scent the smell of bureaucracy and cigarettes and just males. Basically, this is a book that has A+ Brazilian legal system representation. If this is on your Netflix and you can watch it, I strongly suggest you to. One day I will finish this book. I don't know when. I'm too much of a pussy to get through because it's starting to get really scary and I don't like that. In the end, I gave Bom Dia, Verônica 5 out of 5 gavels for legal representation. Not sure how I would rate this book, seeing as I'm still trying to finish it. One day I will. The next book on this list is Egomaniac by Vi Keeland. This basically is a book about this guy who is also a divorce attorney. What is the fixation of these people with family law? Like, legit, family law is literally hell. I wouldn't touch family law with a 10-foot pole. Like, legit. And it's not even the thing that gives you the most money. Like, basically the guy is a divorce attorney. He works in New York. He's very hot. He also had his heart broken. He's cold. And he doesn't fall in love. Yada, 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 yada. Y'all know the drill by now. So basically a lot of shenanigans ensue. And he ends up sharing his office space with this girl who is a marriage counselor. The first half of this book has little to no lawyer representation. Also, it's pretty garbage. The second half of this book actually gets really interesting though. The guy, the main love interest, is involved in a custody battle. He thought that he was the biological father of his child, and turns out someone got cucked. So basically he is involved with this custody battle because his ex-wife doesn't want to let him have access to the kid, or doesn't want to let him have access to the kid for free. And he still wants to keep this connection that he had with the kid because he raised the kid, and even though the kid is not biologically his, he still feels like the father of the child. This is a huge point of contentiousness in the book, and I was like, this is kind of weird. Why this is so contentious? And then I realized that in the United States, the only ways in which you can acquire a child are through birth, if you are that child's biological parent, or if through adoption, so you can adopt a child. And that's why you see so many of those videos like asking my stepfather to adopt me and whatnot, which is something that I never really saw in Brazil. And this was really, the contracts was quite striking, and I was like, there must be a reason for this. And I actually figured out why there is. Brazil actually developed an idea that is called socio-affective parentality. Basically what this means is that the judiciary system is forced to recognize that parental bonds are not tied to biological bonds. So basically in this guy's case, he thought he was the biological father, he raised the child, and then he found out that he was not the biological father. The Brazilian courts in that case would immediately recognize that he has formed a socio-affective parental bond with that child, and he could not get kicked out of that child's life, mostly because that child will also suffer a lot too. So this has to be taken into consideration. And I thought this was really interesting to kind of see like how two different systems would treat the same situation. And like, don't get me wrong, this shit happens all the time. This is why I don't like family law. I would literally sit down on trials of people who had like grisly murder charges on their backs, and there will be less police officers than an average day in family court. Legit, family law is just so fucking, I cannot deal with it. But I'm not sure how exactly accurate to the American procedure it is, but it made me fall down the family law research rabbit hole at 3 a.m., which is definitely not a place I like to be. So I have to give this like 4 out of 5 gavels for legal representation. The question of parentality in family law is actually very relevant, and a lot of my friends who are also in my master's degree program with me are actually studying precisely this in many ways, shapes, and forms. How this has been recognized for LGBTQ plus parents, how, this has been recognized for step-parents or siblings or, all of that. And it's actually quite interesting, but definitely not something that I would like to work with at all, because God, no. So I read the Spark Notes for this because I did not want to reread this, but yeah. The next book on this list is this one. This is The Trial by Franz Kafka. This is a classic, and it's one of those classics that you're like, why am I reading this? I read this the first time when I was a teenager and I was like, what is going on? And then I read this in my second year of law school and I was like, what is going on? And I'm pretty sure that if I were to read it today, I would still be like, what is going on? Basically, in the trial, you're following this character called Joseph K. And Joseph K. wakes up one day and is taken to a court to answer for a crime that he does not know which one it is. So he's following this trial process that he has really no idea what it's about, and ends up consuming him completely and consuming his life completely. The reason why I wanted to bring this today is because even though this is translated as The Trial, the original in German, it's the literal translation is The Procedure. And this is very common in civil law countries like the majority of Europe, and Brazil also is, that you have like a civil procedure code and a criminal procedure code. And basically the critique that Kafka is creating here is that sometimes you follow the procedure more than you follow the law itself, and like it's like the procedures matter more than the actual justice that is being delivered. So as long as the procedure is followed, you can do all sorts of atrocities, and that's going to be a-okay, which is kind of eerie thinking that this book was published before World War II. Hannah Arendt was one who literally talked about the banality of evil and how this following of procedures was literally what the Nazis would use for excuse, like I was just following orders. And basically this is kind of like the critique that he wants to bring in the trial. Not the only critique at all, but I think that this is something that still carries on, specifically in this to this day, that the bureaucracy of the legal system sometimes can matter more than the justice and the law itself. So I'm not sure that I like the translation as the trial, because I think when you translate it as the procedure, it really nails down that he's not being tried before the law or before the justice. He is being tried by this procedure that appears to have no end. And everybody seems to know the rules, and he's very confused about it. And I feel like when you are a person who is working with the law, you can kind of forget how confusing the legal procedure feels, how stifling a court can be. And I feel like when you read this book I feel like it kind of brings me back to that same feeling when I didn't understand what was going on, and I still felt like this entire system is just out to get me. It's not here to deliver justice, it's here just to make sure that I never achieve justice at all. It's just here to stop me from achieving justice. I mean, this is why I wanted to bring this book. I could speak about this book for like a whole hour, even though this book drives me completely insane, but I think that this is an accurate reminder of what law means and how law can be used to deliver the greatest of injustices, as it was used many times throughout history. So a 4.5 out of 5 gavels. No, 5 out of 5 gavels. Law feels pretty surrealist every once in a while. Always. Let's see. The next book on the list is... Why do I do this to myself? The next book on this list is Submitting to the Lawyer by B.G. Wayne. I want to point out that when a person goes into a book with a half-naked guy on the cover, that person is not necessarily looking for legal representation. However, oh boy. If I remember like half of the plot of Submitting to the Lawyer, that's too much. I know that there is a really contrived plot of recovering from sexual trauma, which I'm not gonna get into it because it's horrid and terribly made. The reason why this book is in this list at all is because the main love interest is a lawyer. He also owns a ranch and a BDSM club. This week, there was a day that I worked 20 hours straight. Like, when does this guy find the time to own and run a BDSM club? Like, in the middle of Montana? There was one moment of this book that I was like, yeah, that kind of checks out. He mentions that because he works in a very small town, he kind of like picks everything up. And this is true. If you work for a law firm or if you have a law practice in a smaller city, basically you won't be able to pick and choose what sort of law areas you want to specialize in. However, if you are a lawyer, general rule of thumb, you do not have time to either own a ranch or a BDSM club, let alone two. So if your dream is to be a lawyer who owns a BDSM club, I suggest you pick one of the two and stick to it. One of them is going to give you a lot of pleasure in life, and I'm going to let you guys choose which one it is. Finally, the last book on this list is this one. It's To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I could not finish a video about legal representation without talking about one of the most famous lawyers in literary history, and that is Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. The reason being, and again, I don't think this is a spoiler, this book is a classic, everyone knows what it's about, but basically, if you don't know, Atticus is designated by the court to serve as an attorney for a man who cannot afford legal counsel. He is designated as the attorney for a black man who has been wrongfully accused of rape. And he knows that his chances are very slim to get his conviction off the table, despite his best efforts and despite, all that he has done to try to get this case off the ground and trying to get the guy to walk away free. He does all that he can, and he does like the best speech of his entire life. And then the guy ends up convicted regardless, unanimously, by an all-white jury. Up until that point, Atticus had been a person who was pretty optimistic about things. But that moment, you can really feel that he was like almost giving up. This is a feeling that I feel on a daily basis. Like, especially when you're working with human rights advocacy, when you're working with unions. I work with a lot of very impoverished people, you feel like you're just constantly losing all the time. And you feel like, you know, the system was not made to accommodate those people. And you feel like you have failed everyone who you have sworn to, you know, try to defend. Even though, like, the profession of an attorney is not a profession of results. It's a profession of means. Like, you promise to do your best, but you cannot guarantee a result. If any attorney guarantees you a result of anything, that attorney is lying. You cannot guarantee anything at all. But still, like, you get involved with the case, especially when it's something that you know it's wrong. You know that sometimes accusations are wrong. You know that sometimes certain things that the government does are wrong. And still, you know, despite your best efforts and despite trying as hard as you can, you know that you're going to lose this case. And the people who need the protection of the law the most will not have it. It's pretty disheartening. And I think that Harper Lee did such a great job in depicting Atticus Finch feeling that in that moment when Jem starts crying and he's like, this is not fair. This is not fair. Why did they do this? This is not fair. And Atticus, like, it's his upteenth time in court. But Atticus was like, yeah, it's not fair and I fucking hate everything and I'm going to go to bed and if I don't wake up, don't wake me up. Leave me there. But then Atticus wakes up in the next morning because life goes on despite you feeling like, you know, you want the ground to swallow you because there's absolutely no reason for you to carry on doing this since you cannot do the basic thing, which is bring justice to people who deserve it. And then he wakes up, he gets down, and then when he gets to the kitchen, the community of that man who has been wrongly accused has given him everything that they could scrap together as thanks. So chicken eggs, vegetables, and stuff. And, you know, they do this as a way to thank Atticus for standing up for them when no one else wanted to do that. And Atticus suddenly feels invigorated and refreshed and starts working on the appeal for the case. And, you know, even though, you know, a lot of things happen in the book after that, I feel like this moment is so important when it comes to legal representation because this is literally, absolutely literally, the process that we go through when we're working with law. We start working and we feel pretty disheartened and we feel like we want to explode the entire system and that nothing is working out as it should. And then you're reminded that you're not doing this for results and that sometimes the mere fact that people know that there is someone out there who's willing to defend them is worth literally everything. And that makes a huge difference and a huge impact. So To Kill a Mockingbird really understood who I am as an attorney and why I do what I do. You know, this feeling that you get after a crushing defeat where, you know, you wake up because the world moves on and you take a deep breath and you appreciate the things that you have and you keep working again. And this is probably the most accurate depiction of what my day-to-day life is at my work that I could ever find. To Kill a Mockingbird get 5 out of 5 gavels out of legal representation. There are so many more books that have half-naked attorneys on the cover. And also so many more books that have like actual legal discussions that I thought was pretty interesting. Let me know if you like this format of a video. If you guys liked it, I'll find some other books to read and read some questionable smut in the meantime, because, you know, that's what I do. Anyways, if you have a legal foundation, a legal nonprofit that offers legal counsel for impoverished people, consider donating for them today. Those people make absolute wonders out of very little. So consider supporting them, consider supporting your public defender's office, and just consider supporting the lawyers in your life in general. There's a lot to be said about lawyers, but we're cool. We're nice people. Mostly. Anyway, this was today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time.